if I think back to some of my favourite TA screens, say they're 45 minutes, I just love it when a candidate has got almost 35 minutes worth of questions for me, and I'm starting to build a picture of that person in terms of what they care about, their competencies, what they see as best practice. For me, those are great screens.
Let's talk a bit about the recruiting process. Would you be able to kind of give us a broad overview of what to expect as a candidate?
We really value seeing people that have grown horizontally within roles, people that are really comfortable going out of their comfort zone, learning, progressing in a non-linear way. Those are the types of people that I think typically have done well in Mews.
What's the most kind of common mistake you see by candidates going through the Mews process?
If someone has no questions for me about the role or the environment, for me, that's a massive red flag.
Welcome to another amazing episode of the Open to Work podcast. We are on another candidate journey here, and this time it's with Mews, and we're being joined by the VP of Talent, James Mantle. Hello, James.
Hey, Matthew. How you doing?
Yeah, really good, really good. Super looking forward to today. I've been an admirer of Mews from afar, and and love that I'm going to be able to kind of open the lid on the business a little bit more today, and hopefully give all the candidates going through your process a bit more information around how you work and what to expect. So why don't we just kind of start with an introduction to you in a bit more detail and your background, and then we'll get into Mews.
Sure. So I've been with Mews for about 3 years, but I spent the last 10 to 12 years working with high growth SaaS scale-ups, a mixture of sort of in-house at VCs, but also working at other companies that have got to unicorn status, which is something that Mews just achieved. I love that stage of growth of organizations, the passion, the energy, like when you're working with founders that think they're going to take over the world. I find that incredibly enriching. Obviously, like most recruiters, I started agency side with Hayes, but that feels like a long, long time ago now, like rocking around in a terrible pinstripe suit and a big leather folder. So I'm pretty happy now that we're moved in-house.
I remember really vividly I bought a suit when I was working for a financial services exec search firm, and it was like one of the most expensive suit I'd ever bought at the time. And then like a month and a half, 2 months later, I left to join a digital exec search firm, and then like never wore that suit ever again.
You make terrible choices when you kind of get those first kind of salary checks as a youngster. I remember buying a suit with terrible shoulder pads. I don't know why I did, but
wow.
it was awful, and I just got mocked for it religiously.
And you're not aging yourself there. You don't come from a period where shoulder pads were cool.
No, just terrible choices.
Nice. Well, moving on for hopefully no terrible choices will be found here. Why don't you introduce us to Mews as a business?
Yeah, we'll do. It's incredibly exciting. So we are a vertical software company, so similar to Shopify and Toast, but our ambition is that we want to improve people's experience when they travel. So we've got that classic disruption story. Our founders were frustrated hoteliers, and I guess if you don't know why sometimes hotels feel clunky, it's because of the kind of the legacy technology that kind of sits within these hotels. So maybe if I can paint a bit of a story here. So I'm sure all of us have had that experience of when you got off a long flight, you arrive at a hotel, and when you just want to relax and you just want to start your holiday, you have to wait in line, you have to get your passport out, you have to do all this paperwork, which is completely alien to the experience you get when you're on an airline. Everything's automated. It's really, really seamless. So what we're trying to do at Mews is build an incredibly user-centric, automated technology platform, which allows a hotel to focus on the guest and create great experiences. So if we can kind of translate that story into what a Mews hotel can do, you get off the plane, you take this journey to the hotel, you've already got an automated itinerary of the things that you love, wine bars, maybe some hikes around that the hotel recommends you do. You can then make the choice to go straight to your room, and you can pre-order food into your hotel room, or the hotel knows that you like orange wine and a table with a view, so they can kind of pre-book that. That's a level of customization that we want to create for hotels, where people's experience when they travel is infinitely better. There's so much opportunity for us to kind of make the most human industry even better by using technology, and that's what Mews does. And we're being really disruptive in the market. I think people are now seeing the power of what we can do, and more brands are coming over to work with us, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and just to be really, really clear, you don't. It's not your own hotels. You're not building a new hotel chain. You're providing software to hotels all around the world.
Well, if you speak to our founder, I'm sure that you wouldn't strike it off the list. But no, we provide the technology for hotels, and yeah, we kind of sit in the background and make them hum, make them more productive,
Yeah.
more profitable, more efficient.
Okay. And so from like a size, scale, metrics perspective, why don't you throw some numbers at us?
Yeah, so it's been a fairly exciting growth journey the last 3 years. So when I joined 3 years ago, we were about 240 people. We're about 1,200 now. We have gone through our Series D about 4 or 5 months ago, and we've just got our unicorn valuation, which is really exciting. When I started, about 60% of our headcount was in the Czech Republic, where we started, but now truly we're a global company. We've got people in about 55 countries around the world. We've got major growth areas in Spain, the US, UK, places like that. And from like a revenue point of view, we're kind of increasing our revenue between 60 and 70% year on year. So the business is in a really healthy point, and that's going to carry on for the next kind of 2 or 3 years, I expect.
Yeah, I think it's particularly exciting kind of watching Mews from afar, going through this incredible revenue growth in an environment where spending as a whole has been reduced and the access to money has been reduced, to be able to see those sorts of metrics and to raise a large growth fund, which is what kind of got you that more than $1 billion valuation in the context of the financial markets we've been in over the last few years, I think is a testament to the strength of the Mews business.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the revenue generation opportunities that we do have are really exciting. So a lot of people see us predominantly as a SaaS business. Actually, that's the system that sits in is like the backbone of the hotel. But we get about 80% of our revenue from a suite of fintech products that kind of actually power the hotel, so safer payments and things like that. So really, as soon as you start lifting the lid and actually work out how the operating kind of the business operates, that's when you're like, well, okay, this is actually really exciting. And I think that's what our investors are kind of really optimistic about.
So just to kind of clarify what that means, are you able to kind of paint a bit of a picture around maybe a business that does something similar in a different industry where the payments infrastructure is really like it's because obviously on the surface you look like a SaaS business and sound like a SaaS business, but really you're like a fintech essentially. So would you be able to kind of help us understand a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so we're what's called a vertical software company, and what that means is that you are able to build products that service the kind of the top to the bottom of that industry with a number of different different features that bolt on to the platform that you do have. So similar businesses to us are like Shopify, where they provide a marketplace, but actually they generate their main part of their revenues when they generate income from each transaction that one of their customers gets. Another one is like Toast. Obviously, Procore have a similar model as well, kind of organization that you know well. But the idea is that we own the entirety of that hospitality industry. We have a suite of products that sit on that platform, and we generate transactions at each one of the payment points for our customers. So in our situation in a hotel, whether it's drinks at a bar, if you've booked a trip, kind of your room service, all of those types of things kind of provide opportunities for us to generate revenue.
Awesome. Yeah. And a massively scalable kind of opportunity. Okay. So how many employees are you at the moment?
About 1,200.
Okay. 1,200. And how does that kind of distribute globally at the moment? And what's your work pattern?
So in terms of our breakdown across our locations, we've got about 350 in the Czech Republic, about 160 in the UK, about 120 in Spain, about 100 in the US. So very, 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 very disparate groups across mostly Western Europe and into the US and into APAC as well. We probably have about 70, 80 people across Australia and APAC. In terms of our work patterns, that's evolved quite a bit since I've been here. I joined as a hybrid company. Like, people in hospitality love getting together. Our offices are good places where people like to work and collaborate, and we get together a lot for collaboration. But we do not want location to impact our ambitions to create diverse teams, but also kind of support getting the best talent. So actually, we're pushing more and more into that remote pattern. and that remote working style. And actually, consequently, as a business, we're having to evolve a lot about how we work, how we hire, types of behaviours we expect from our employees, and we're all having to kind of learn and go on that journey together. So it's really interesting to kind of witness that as we evolve.
Yeah, so it's possible that so do you get to voluntarily decide whether or not you come into an office a certain number of days a week, or whether or not you're a remote employee? Like, how does that work as a candidate?
Yeah, completely. It's one of the main kind of behaviours, I think, of a Mews is they're a bit like a cat. They don't like being told what to do. And actually, I've got members of my team that are near our office here in London that need to be around people for their own well-being, or because that's just how they like to operate. And they're in the office, say 3-4 days a week. This is really unusual that I'm in the office. I tend to come in about once a month for like a team event. And most of the time I'm working at home. I've got a young family, sit in my Crocs, and that works for me. So really, we just let the employees kind of pick the kind of the working style that suits them, suits their lifestyle, and no questions asked.
Perfect. And that's, I think, quite rare, to be honest, nowadays, that you'd be able to support so many different types of working patterns simultaneously. So kind of fascinating that could be its own podcast, like how you've operationalized that is probably its own podcast that will, that not me, but other people would love to get into. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the recruiting process. Would you be able to kind of give us a broad overview of what to expect as a candidate from kind of application through to offer at a high level?
So Alderson James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all.
Yeah, sure. So I should make a call out is that obviously being a hospitality business, we think welcoming people is something that we should be great at. So there's a really great book that we care a lot about called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, and we shared that around our TA team. And there's lots of lessons in there that we try to take in terms of how we treat candidates. And my team obsessively go through Glassdoor data, candidate surveys on a weekly basis to try and improve. And we've seen some real improvement in that candidate survey scores over the last 6 to 8 months. But in terms of the recruiting process, we want to front load and provide candidates with as much information as we possibly can. So if you start the career site, it's got info on the interview process, the behaviours of users, what they should expect at each interview stage. And then attached to the interview invites, there are breakdowns of how they should expect the interviewers to behave, kind of questions, kind of the conversational style, what to wear, anything that we think a candidate will ask. And at the same time, we're also updating our Life at Mews document. So if you do get the job, we're looking a few stages down the line, but help you understand the rituals within the company, the mission, the vision, the development opportunities, and our view on D&I. So all of that front-loaded information should equip the candidate with everything they need to know to thrive in the process, but also sell it to them a bit more and help them work out that how we operate is the right place. They should be comfortable with that. And I personally believe like TA is accountable for creating that, and not only the stickiness, but also the momentum in the process. So I believe that TA should be creating like a really sticky process and creating a lot of momentum with a candidate where they want to get through to the end of the process. And we like to bake in as much context in that first stage, in that recruiter stage, as we possibly can, so that we have like the first 10 minutes, instead of jumping in straight in with questions, we're welcoming the candidate in, saying like, what do you want to know about the company? Tell me what your questions are. So actually it's a much more welcoming experience, and actually you give me an introduction to who you are, why do you want this job? So we try and create that at the outset. But our standard process is normally a conversation with TA, conversation with the hiring manager, a technical task which we're trying to orientate towards a more remote working style, and then a final interview. All of those are structured processes because we want to improve the diversity of our teams, and we use Metaview as a product to ensure we have transparent decision makings, got high rigor interviews, and actually interviewers are operating in a really healthy way as well.
Yeah, nice. And Metaview are a sponsor of this show, so a really nice little plug there. So let's start with the application. So it sounds like if you are thinking of applying to Mews, really check out all the resources that are on your website, because it sounds like there's a lot there, kind of more than the average company.
Yep.
And important, I think, to know whether to self-select in or self-select out. Not every culture, not every environment is right for you. And so, making sure you understand whether or not there's a good alignment here, I think is really important starting place. And then submitting your application, is that like a relatively straightforward form? Is it a kind of easy apply? Like, just, I'm sure that if you're seeing this, you probably already have submitted an application or something, but like, is that a relatively straightforward process?
We do vary that a little bit, because I'm sure lots of organizations, it's an employer driven market at the moment, and unfortunately there are times when we will need to ask some qualifying questions to make sure people understand and are suitable for the role. So yes, for most roles it's a fairly straightforward application. We use Greenhouse, but for some there will be a couple of qualifying application questions, so we can test not only the candidate's interest, the level of their experience, and actually how they can kind of contribute to us. So we do equip the recruiters to kind of change that application process slightly.
Okay. And then presuming you pass that stage and you've submitted all of the documents you need to on your CV, etc., which sounds like that's still the primary document. What can I expect from like a first recruiter conversation?
Well, hopefully you get to meet a wonderful member of my team that's really passionate about what they're doing. They're really curious about your experience and what you're interested in. We really try and only speak to like a limited pool of candidates. We don't want to pull lots and lots of people through into the process, because I don't think that creates a great candidate experience of lots of people being rejected. So if you're being spoken to by the team, there's probably a 50-50 chance you're going to go through to the next stage. You should expect the recruiter to ask you to ask lots of questions. They want to see your curiosity. They want to see what you want to know about the business. You should expect it to be structured from our side in terms of some things we want to get out of it, but actually for it to feel really conversational and really relaxed. I think if you look at Glassdoor, people tend to give really positive comments about the environment and the conduct of the interviewers. This is a really, really challenging interview, but actually they enjoy the conversation, actually the flow of it, and how we make them feel.
I think there's this kind of misconception that structure means a lack of human, takes away the humanity and the conversationality behind the interview. And I couldn't disagree more. You're not following just a script, but having, a direction. It's like following Google Maps, right? Like you need to know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. But, and the key directions you need to take, but you don't need to look at your phone every single step of the way.
No, and I do agree with you. And I think maybe for more junior interviewers, unfortunately, it can feel a bit dogmatic. But actually, you're right. Actually, as people get more experience with either recruiting for a particular role or actually experience as interviewers, they will kind of go in quite an agile way through the conversation and kind of circle back and use the structure to basically like pluck through bits that they haven't had enough coverage on. Yeah. So I agree. For me, I think it's a really important thing to add a foundation of structure, and you can put all of the comfort, the kind of candidate engagement pieces on top of that to make it a really solid interview experience.
Yeah, fab. And then. So I have lots of questions, but it sounds like the next stage then is your, presuming you pass that, is a hiring manager interview. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that a candidate can expect, and what should really a candidate do to prepare for that hiring manager interview?
Well, I mean, in terms of helping them prepare, most of them will probably have a conversation with one of the recruiters to kind of check in, make sure they've got any questions before. To see if they've got any questions before they meet the hiring manager. And my recruiters will always say, right, do your research, make sure you understand the role, the organization, make sure you're really comfortable with it. And as you said earlier, they have to be comfortable that they're going to kind of opt into that working style. But the managers will always introduce themselves. We spend a lot of time coaching them on how to pitch the company, because I think there's a tendency to make it too shiny, and I think that leads to a really, really poor candidate experience. So what we do in terms of our interview training is we use engagement survey data, the latest data, to see actually how do people feel about it, what's the environment, what are some of the natural challenges. Where, being frank, we're obviously a scaling, maturing company. There are challenges in how we communicate. At times it's chaotic. Our process is still being refined, and it's really important that managers represent that reality to candidates, and it doesn't missell that to them. So to kind of circle back on that, managers hopefully will do a really truthful and honest pitch, and then they'll really want to get into understand the technical competency of that person, what they're looking for, what their development aspirations, how they'll operate in our environment. We tend to look across three vectors for candidates, which is not only kind of technical competency, but also their alignment to our values and some of the behaviours that we see as well. And more, we are moving away from purely technical competencies as an assessment criteria, because Mews is accelerating at such a rate. Every 6 months, the bar is rising. Every 6 months, people's roles are changing and getting more and more complex. So if you hire someone for the role that we have now, in 6 months' time, they'll be outdated. So we really need to dig into their ability to learn, growth mindset, look at some of the values that they're displaying. And more managers are kind of leaning into that as the thing that kind of helps them decide on whether someone moves forward.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. How do you evaluate someone's growth mindset and curiosity, do you think?
I think there's a number of ways. If I look at my TA screen, if I've spent 2 or 3 minutes kind of talking about how wonderful the environment is and this really exciting opportunity, and if someone has no questions for me about the role or the environment, for me that's a massive red flag. But if you're getting into the stage where you're getting deeper into the process, you should be wanting to understand the manager that could be managing you in a couple of months' time. How do they develop their people? How does the team operate? What are some of the projects they've got coming up? So really, the curiosity piece mainly comes from either questions that the candidate asks or some of the situations that they've been involved in. Do they go for the easiest solution to a problem they faced in the last role, or did they actually try and seek out best practice, get advice, get feedback from others? So we have kind of questions that are set up for that. And then in terms of growth mindset, we really value seeing people that have grown horizontally within roles. So they've taken on additional challenges, maybe ones that they're not equipped for, and actually look at how they bolster their experience or capability to be able to kind of solve that challenge. And I think if you can get people that are really comfortable going out of their comfort zone, learning, progressing in a non-linear way, those are the types of people that I think typically have done well in Mews. So we try and hone in with sort of questions that kind of get to understand that a bit more.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that this kind of element of you learn a lot about candidates from the questions they ask you. And I can't stress this enough, like to come over prepared with almost more questions than you could possibly ask, because you just get, it really leaves a strong impression. Like if I always say to execs when I'm going through interview, or to senior candidates when I'm going through interviews with them, if I'm able to answer all of your questions, you haven't asked enough questions, or you haven't asked the right questions. Like a recruiter really should be getting to the end of that conversation going, I don't know the answer to this, because you've gone so deep that and you've gone so into the business in a way that I really don't understand how I couldn't give you a good response to that. And that's always like a great mark that someone's thinking a level ahead of of me and thinking ahead of the business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think if I think back to some of my favorite TA screens, say they're 45 minutes, I just love it when a candidate has got almost 35 minutes worth of questions for me, and I'm starting to build a picture of that person in terms of what they care about, their competencies, what they see as best practice. And actually, all I really need to do then for my structured interview is just tick off a couple of little bits around some of their functional expertise. But if a candidate has owned the conversation, is that comfortable in our slightly unstructured style, for me, those are great screens.
Yeah, I think if any recruiters are listening to this, outside of or any kind of hiring managers are listening to this to kind of learn and listen, I think these are all really, really interesting tips around how to interview and how to pick up different types of skills, and to not be kind of so dogmatic that it's a one-way street. You actually, I know there's kind of this idea that you should leave 10 minutes for candidate questions at the end, and lots of companies try and do that, but the reality is you learn so much, potentially even more about the candidate if you let them ask you and interrogate you. There should always be space for that in an interview, and you're absolutely missing out if you don't do that.
100%. And also, if you equip the people with that context at the start of the call, they'll be able to pull out better examples to answer your question in the latter half, because actually they understand actually the maturity of the team, they understand the ambition, so actually they'll be able to better filter, right, this is the right example that James really wants to hear about. So yeah, win-win.
We are delighted to be sponsored by Metaview. Metaview is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes, and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using Metaview across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with Metaview. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls. Yeah. And then how does this change? So we've done the hiring manager screen, and then do things diverge then depending on the kind of where you are at in the business and the sort of the function of role that you're going through, or does it generally speaking stay the same?
Our interview processes are generally quite elastic at times, because we're always looking to kind of optimize them in some way. So, for example, in terms of our tech hiring at the moment, we're doing some A/B testing in terms of our process to try and truncate the process as much as we possibly can, but still get the same quality of candidate experience, offer acceptance, and stuff like that as well. And we're also kind of trialing different ways of, as I mentioned earlier, different ways to do our technical exercise that helps us get people that are better suited to our working patterns. So whether it's like a more remote friendly or remote suited technical task, or for example, our tech teams, when we build a technical task for our candidates, we'll connect them on a Slack with the assessors so they can ask questions about it as well. So fundamentally, the steps are the same, but actually we're constantly testing each of those stages to see if we kind of manage it or deliver it slightly differently. Does it make it more efficient for us, but also more efficient for the candidate, and get the same results? So there's a big focus in our business at the moment around productivity and efficiency. And so we're trying to think how we can obviously get more, get the same levels of outcome and actually have less interview time as well. So that's the kind of challenge we have within the team.
And so there will be a technical test at this point, which will be specific to the function and potentially even the role that you're interviewing for. And will that be kind of done alongside interviews with other people, like sort of like a panel, or kind of a team interview where you're meeting multiple different people in different interviews?
It completely depends. So some of those are judged in isolation. So this is just like a bar that you have to meet. But then some of our teams, so for example, within our people team, quite often we will use work that's, say, 6 months out, because actually that's like a fantastic tool just to help people understand the work they would be coming in to deliver and contribute to. And that's something that will then form the discussion at the final stage, because you want to recreate what that person could be walking into. Right, come in, you've done this deep dive on this particular topic, come in and try and almost pitch your idea. Let's have this conversation, let's recreate the kind of the unstructured sort of brainstorming type environment that you would have when you're working with your peers and you need to influence them, that your idea and your thoughts are effective. And I think one of the things that maybe I've noticed about Mews versus other environments is we really value people that are coming with opinions rather than actually stuff that they've read or they've researched and things like that, because there are so many unknowns that in our environment we're trying to fix all these things, build all these things, kind of scale and grow and everything like that at the same time, which I'm sure loads of other companies are going through that process as well. But it adds so much value if someone can kind of clearly say, this is why I think this is the best approach. This is the evidence that I do have. And it just instantly elevates that person in terms of, right, okay, they've got the authority, they've got the natural confidence to actually be a leader or take command of these types of projects in our environment. So that's a really powerful thing we look for as well.
Yeah, and so my kind of follow-on question then was going to be, how do you best kind of prepare yourself to execute this kind of sounds like a really important stage, like one of the most important stages of your process?
Well, I think if you're going to form opinions, I think you have to be very comfortable with the subject matter. And with most of our technical exercises, we'll give people a couple of choices. So do you want to do the blue pill or the red pill, to kind of use the Matrix analogy? But I think become a subject matter expert in the thing that you need to learn about, to the point where you can kind of form opinions. We are obviously concerned about the rise of AI in our interviewing processes. And ideally, by having this technical task, we can also kind of really understand actually how much this person know what they're talking about and how much value they're going to provide. So I would encourage you to learn as deep as you can. Look at maybe other organisations that are similar to ourselves or one stage further on in their growth journey. But also, don't expect you have to have all the answers. I think there's a really important thing, actually understanding that you can say, I don't know, I've never worked in that, or I didn't do that piece of research. It's much more empowering. Actually, people kind of understand that as a sign of confidence, that you don't know that. You won't have all the answers, rather than actually trying to kind of fluff it in the interview.
Mm-hmm. Because it sounds like these kind of, when you do the technical exercises that have this kind of, especially if it's like a workshop, you send a document over, it will be kind of robustly discussed, right? Kind of, yes, a concept of, disagree and commit. And that is a really important part of lots of very fast growing businesses. But it sounds like you have to be able to have a proper in-depth conversation about a topic and stand by your opinion, or be flexible to new information that's coming up, and be able to adapt your opinion based on what's happening there. And that sounds kind of just as important.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're assessing as well for kind of things like communication. How do you work with others? Like, there's so many sub-threads to. I love workshop exercises. The first person who we've had on already that's talked about the idea of doing kind of workshops, because they test for so many skills that are very real life. Like the idea of sitting there and doing a 90-day plan. I've done a couple of them, and they are like, you just don't learn that much, because I know that I've even had this in presentations in the past, where the first slide has been that everything I'm about to tell you is going to be completely irrelevant the first day I walk through the door. Because the information that you're lacking is vast, and the prioritization of the work you're having to do is vast. So I love that you're taking a slightly more kind of realistic approach, to be honest.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of the candidates getting to know the people that they could be working with on a slightly more real level. Because actually, everyone's got an element of a guard up when they're doing interviews. But actually, in the moment when you're throwing ideas around, there are a few moments there where it feels very natural, it feels very organic, and that candidate can walk away and go, do you know what? I actually don't like James. I don't like Mews. He's not the type of guy I want to work with. And actually, that's such a valuable lesson for someone to learn, as opposed to kind of going through this kind of fake through the interview process and not truly understanding the person that they could be working within a month's time.
Yeah. And then once you've done the technical stage, are there any other stages after that?
So that technical stage will feed into that final stage. I mean, for some leadership roles, we'll have like additional stages where they need to meet the investors and things like that. But for the most part, that's the final process. Okay.
And so how many how many times do you think you would interact with a Mews person as we go through this process?
With one of my recruiters?
Well, no, sorry. How many interview stages, I guess, will there be from the moment you apply to kind of hopefully getting an offer?
So there'll be 3 interviews, and then I guess kind of the take-home test that you'll submit. So 3 stages of meetings.
And on average, and I know this will kind of change wildly by function, but generally speaking, how long does this process take, do you find?
About 40 days. So I don't think there's definitely scope to kind of optimize and reduce that a little bit. But for us, we wouldn't want to go fast. That would either damage that candidate experience, impact our ability to find great people, so spend a lot of time sourcing, and impact the diversity of the hires that we need to make. So yes, we could go slightly faster, but there are some risk things there that we probably wouldn't want to give away. So it's one of the things we do need to improve. I would like to get it to sort of about 35 days, especially if the market's going to get more competitive next year.
Sorry, just to double click on that. Is that the entire length of like when you open a role to when that role is marked as hired, or is that from the moment the applicant starts interviewing to the moment they finish interviewing? So
the candidate's time through our process.
Okay. So it's essentially kind of 3 to 4 weeks process, more or less, if not slightly longer. Okay. And it sounds like, I think one of the threads that I've been kind of hearing is this access to kind of feedback and this kind of candidate experience that's at the heart of everything that Mews are doing. I mean, when how do you interact with candidates from a rejection perspective? Like, well, how do you think, and what's your philosophy on the feedback you want to give candidates?
Yeah, I mean, this has been an evolving piece, and actually each of our sub teams, so we've got 3 recruiting sub teams, one on go-to-market, one for G&A, and one for R&D, and we've tested to find out which approach the candidates prefer and at what stage. So actually each of our sub teams operates in a slightly different way. And we will always, after the recruiter interview, we will always offer the candidates, hey, do you want some written feedback over email, or do you want to book in a 15-minute call to chat through the feedback? And we find that's the best way. We've actually seen our candidate experience scores and kind of the people's positivity about the business increase significantly since we've not only tailored it depending on the candidate's preferences, but also given them the choice. And we really lean on. We know it's a hard market at the moment, and we know we're in a really fortunate position where we are growing aggressively. So we really try and lean on providing as much transparent feedback as we possibly can, so it's helpful for people in that next stage. And there are times that we've had incidents actually in the last week or so where that's blown back in my recruiter's face, and actually they've tried to be really helpful and provide really detailed feedback on why we're not progressing with a candidate, and they've taken objection to that. So the danger is that if people do react like that, it makes us try and help less. But our ambition is always, look, for all people, we will try and provide as much helpful information as we possibly can.
If I've learned kind of one thing, I think, from being active on social media and talking about rejection, is that you can't please everyone, and that someone will always take objection to the way that you've decided to do that. And I think what I hear listening to this is that you're super trying to assume positive intent and do your best and what you feel is right. And I think that's all you can really do, because you won't please everyone, and it's important to at least try your best to kind of have the candidate at the heart of what you're trying to do. But like with any customer, you're always going to have the person who gives the 1-star review.
Yeah, I agree. And I was sitting down with one of my junior recruiters yesterday, and actually I was saying, look, you've done everything right. Unfortunately, you can't control that reaction that you just received. Keep doing what you're doing. Your intention is, I love your intention. Please keep trying to help these people find their next role. But I think it's part of that is our ethos as a team, but part of that is the culture at Mews. I've never worked in an environment that democratizes information as much as we possibly can, is as transparent as Mews is, and actually has that kind of guest experience, that hospitality mindset at its core. So there's a real nice kind of cocktail of behaviours there that I think we try and replicate with the hiring process. So actually candidates know what they could be walking into, and hopefully we can kind of keep people interested, even if we reject them, interested in future roles within the business.
Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate goal for any kind of candidate recruiting function, and for any business, right? Like, you never know who's going to end up being a customer of your products, and you never know how that kind of negative candidate experience is going to, and especially for someone who works in the hospitality world, if you end up going in this person working for a hotel chain in the future, which is not impossible if they're looking at a company like Mews, they could end up deciding not to purchase your products in the future. And I think that is such an important part of this journey.
Yeah. So last year, it was about 18% of our candidates are people that work in hotels. So there is you're right, exactly right. There is a danger that we could turn away potential customers, people that become GM of hotels in the future. So that's something we have to take very seriously as well.
Oh man, that is such an interesting stat. I would love to share that with the world, because so many people miss out on this really critical element and if you would never treat customers like you treat candidates in this, most businesses, not you specifically, but most businesses would never treat their customers like they treat their candidates. And I think I always find it shocking to hear the stories that we hear, because it's just a direct relationship with revenue. There will be.
Yeah.
All right, a couple of quick fire questions. What's the most kind of common mistake you see by candidates going through the Mews process?
Not asking questions. I mean, I think I've been clear that this is my biggest concern. But if they are, I feel really passionate. We've got an amazing product to talk about. If there's nothing in there that kind of sparks curiosity, for me, I think that's a kind of a major missed opportunity.
And I'd love to hear about a story about a candidate that stood out in a positive way.
Yeah, so we just closed a really exciting VP role that I worked on, and we had a candidate that was kind of a wild card at every single stage, but everyone loved her. She didn't really have everything we wanted in the role, actually very little of the kind of the required job spec, but she was great. She had great growth mindset. She'd shown that she was really able to kind of start building change management programs and stuff like that. So we all loved her as a person, her behaviours, her attributes, her alignment with the values, and we ended up redesigning the scope of the role to kind of fit her capability. So she joins us in a couple of months, and I'm really excited to see the impact that she can make. But she was not a strong fit for the role at any point, but we just loved her as a person.
I love that. And what are your top 3 recommendations for candidates who want to work at Mews?
So I think we touched on that work patterns piece, but I think now in the market we're seeing companies operating in very different ways, and how we operate and behave is suited to how we work. So really reflect on the working style and environment that will get the best out of you and actually suit your lifestyle. I couldn't work in a hybrid or an office role because I have 2 young kids, and I like to take them to nursery and stuff like that as well. So really reflect on the environment that would get the best out of you and you can work in. 2, as I say, do your preparation, get into Glassdoor, do research on the interviewers so you can ask good questions about them as people. And maybe they've got some recency bias in this one, but use this. It's so basic, but use the STAR model for how you answer questions. I find it infuriating when people just stick at the action level in their answers and they don't give me the context in terms of what they're trying to solve, and actually the outcomes that they delivered. So get out of that action phase and start thinking about the situation and give me the context. So I got a great understanding of the problems you're solving and the results you're delivering.
Nice. And there are plenty of episodes of the podcast where we go into exactly how to do the STAR method. So go on to the Open to Work podcast and check it out, because there's loads of content there. Awesome. James, thanks so much. I think this is going to be really valuable to kind of candidates out there who are kind of preparing for any role really, and any kind of job process, but also for candidates going through Mews. Hopefully they found this really valuable. Hopefully you're kind of listening to this and that James has either turned you on or turned you off for the right reasons, and that you're kind of excited about the journey that you're about to go on, right? Because as we said, not all jobs are right for everyone, and maybe you've heard something here going, you know what, it's not quite right for me, and that's maybe you self-selecting out for the right reasons, if I'm allowed to say that, James. But let's focus on the positives.
You can, and my specialty is turning people off for sure. But no, thanks for your time, Matthew. I really enjoyed the chat, and I hope some of the people that are listening kind of apply to our roles, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Perfect. And, stay tuned to the Open to Work podcast. We've got our candidate journey stream, so get loads of insights from lots of different companies around the world who are kind of hiring at the moment. And then also check out the kind of core podcast. We can get weekly job search tips from recruiting and HR leaders from around the world. So stay tuned for many more amazing conversations with folks like James. Thanks so much, James.
Cheers. Bye.